Do I get union pay now?
Yes, you do. You have earned it.
Okay.
You've earned it. And we were laughing because actually Daniel was supposed to be in a movie now, but fortunately the schedule got a little pushed. So he was off, and then he was back on, and we managed to figure out a way to get him on. But we were, and the last minute I had to think of a good title because I really wanted him to talk about his roles both in front of the screen and behind, and so I called it Straddling the Screen. And then somebody said, that sounds like porn. Anyway.
But the good news is there actually is a screen I could straddle.
You could straddle.
We'll see where the night goes.
Yes. Well, I have gotten to know Daniel a little bit over the years. We're actually working on something together, not to be revealed. But he is literally one of the most intelligent, thoughtful, gracious people I've ever met. And then last year, I took him to the Governor's Awards as my +1. And women started fainting around him. And I was reminded, oh yes, he is more than just this very intelligent producer. He is a movie star. It was crazy. They apologized to me this year. The guy was like, I'm so sorry, I couldn't help myself. I was like, Anyway, so you have very extreme roles in your life. Tell me how that works. How did you get into producing? You were doing so great as an actor, and you continue to, but you decided to take on this whole other Megillah in your life. And believe me, I know what that's like.
I just wasn't busy enough. I needed more to do, I think.
I'm sure.
No, it started when I was working as an actor on Hawaii Five-0, and we were renegotiating contracts. And I knew that I'd wanted to produce at some point, but as many of you in this audience know, it's easy just to call yourself a producer. Anyone can do it.
No barriers to entry whatsoever.
It's true. The barriers to success, however. But I wanted to have some infrastructure behind me, and so to get set up at CBS Studios with that infrastructure was really important, and they were kind enough to allow me to do that. So my first producing deal was at CBS.
So, and what did you produce under that deal, if I may ask?
Well,
often those deals don't actually produce anything, but they're good to have.
Yeah, the first project that we ever brought to them was actually The Good Doctor, and that was back in, I want to say, 2014 or 2015, and we developed it with a writer that you may all know, a woman named Adele Lim. And
Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah. And so that was actually one of the first projects my company ever produced. It didn't end up on the air at CBS, but it was really a rewarding experience to kind of cut my teeth there and learn about the ins and outs of TV producing. And
now it's a hit show on ABC, and CBS is crying.
I don't know if they're crying, but ABC's very happy.
Yes. They're quietly crying. They don't like to admit it.
No, it's nice, and kind of tying into the theme of the summit here. It's nice that one of the first successes for my company was actually a show that originated in Asia, and it kind of speaks to the currency and the agency now of projects that come from places like Korea, China, Japan, and now, as I'm sure many of you know. It's regular business practice to go to Asia to look for IP.
Is that something you very intentionally want to do, is finding IP in Korea and other parts of Asia?
Well, I knew I had a specific relationship to Korea, and I knew that they were producing really quality content for a long time. So it seemed to me just a matter of time before properties started crossing over. There were also properties from Israel and England that had, kind of been made into American TV shows. So why not Korea? I don't think anyone would argue with the quality of the content there. It was just a matter of finding the right project to bring over.
I think if anything, people are realizing that Korea is a hotbed of talent. And I have to just mention, there's an amazing book I'm reading about Korean culture and how it really was a top-down effort. The government decided that they were going to create culture and export it, and has done so successfully with K-pop and K-drama and whatnot. So were you aware of, because at the time you picked up The Good Doctor, maybe it wasn't quite as well known that there was so much content to be mined. I think you were one of the first. I know other movies have been adapted, but I don't know of any other TV shows. That was perhaps one of the first?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of the first, and certainly the most successful of all of the attempts. And you know this business well enough, Janet, to know that you can never guarantee success. So
Oh, yes, you can.
maybe you can because you're a pro. But
Hardly.
but it's one of those things where you take educated guesses, and there was a lot to this particular property that I thought would transfer well to the States and actually worldwide. The Good Doctor has since been remade in Japan as well, and I'm told that there's a Thai production in development. So, there are certain things that are franchisable, so to speak, or communicate to audiences around the world.
What did you see in that show? Because just earlier I was interviewing Wei Zhang of Alibaba Pictures, and she very specifically talked about why movies as diverse as, say, A Dog's Life, A Capernaum, or A Green Book were able to get to the Chinese audience, because they really pulled on people's heartstrings, and they talked about loneliness and, want a sense of belonging. What was it about The Good Doctor that made you think it would translate well?
Oh, there are a number of things. I think, number one, there are very few genres that are more tried and true than the medical genre in the U.S. I mean, ever since television was a thing, you had like Dr. Kildare and ER and Chicago Hope and, now Chicago Med, Grey's Anatomy, of course, House. That was something that I knew would not be new to American viewers. But inside that genre that everyone knew was a little twist on it, and that was to have someone living with autism at its center. And I didn't realize that how much autism affected Koreans, but there's a staggering statistic about the number of Korean young boys with autism, and so and I know several people in my life who have been touched by autism in one way or another, and so it felt like the right time to do something like that. And for me, I've always wanted to try and develop shows that have heart and a sense of positivity and something in terms of what we contribute to the culture. And so it was all of those things, and of course finding the right writer, David Shore, who was an Emmy-winning writer from House, was an essential ingredient as well. And the cast, all of those things, all of that kind of alchemy that comes together to make a success if you're lucky.
But it's damn hard to not just get a show on the air, but then have it last. What do you think were the reasons for the success of this show?
I think, in television, anytime you have a show that lasts, it's because people fall in love with the characters and the writing, because there isn't that much that differentiates one show from another. But I think we have some extraordinary performances led by Freddie Highmore, and I think the writing is really strong, and I think the ideas that we had right at the start still come through very strongly, and that is the idea that you can achieve despite your obstacles. You can have a group of people from very disparate backgrounds coming together for a common cause. These are all ideas that I'm happy to espouse, and I think, frankly, we could use a little bit more of.
So you sometimes take a role in that show.
I did. I played a real jerk.
That wasn't hard to do. No.
Yeah, no. My wife says it's typecasting, but it was fun.
How do you balance the two? I mean, do you feel any conflict straddling the screen, being in front of and behind, and do they see you differently because you are a producer on it?
I think they saw me a little bit differently because I was a producer on it, and I actually had to be aware of that role when I was acting on it, acting on the show. It was really nice for me to act on a show where I knew it wasn't about me, and it was really to enable and lift up the people on the show. I think Freddie Highmore does such an extraordinary job, and the fact that I could be a foil for him or an antagonist to him to actually showcase how talented he really is was a pleasure. I was happy to do it, and I was happy to think on a team level for that.
So you've taken on so many different roles. I mean, in Lost, you were someone that we barely heard speak in English.
Right.
So this has been a fascinating journey. I want you to talk a little bit about some of the key roles that you've had over the decades and what they meant for you and how you've grown from each.
I really feel like I've learned from every role that I've taken. Lost, of course, was the one that put me on the map, so to speak. And there were so many challenges with that role that it really taught me a lot about how to navigate a career afterwards. And there were also like incredible rewards associated with that role. I'm so grateful to have been a part of it. You know, it was such really, I think, elegant storytelling. I think to this day it affects how shows are cast and how stories are told. We were the first bingeable show before binging was a thing. And you know, people would get the DVDs and sit and watch them for days. And we were around right as podcasts were happening. And so we were the first show that people were podcasting about. And back then there were forums instead of Twitter. And so people were talking about our show that way. But if you look at the way shows are now structured with flashbacks and flash forwards and the storytelling narrative, I credit Lost with having a lot to do with how that's done now.
There was something so captivating and mysterious about your character. There was so much attention on your character precisely because people were always wondering what you were. Did you have a good idea? And it changed over time. Did you have a strong sense of what you wanted to convey through that character?
Yes, I really did, and I was really concerned about it in the beginning because I didn't know where the character was going. But I always said that my worst nightmare would have been had the show been canceled after the pilot.
Oh, right, and you didn't get to develop the character further.
Because, you know, for those of you who saw Lost, in the first episode, my character wasn't very likable, and some would argue stereotypical. But you know, one of the first things I did when we were shooting the pilot was to sit down with Damon Lindelof and J.J. Abrams and ask them what they had in mind for the character, because if it stayed like this, we would have a problem. But they assured me that to stay with it and that things were going to change and that what you see is not necessarily what you get. And sure enough, you know, all the characters on Lost went through a lot of development and growth. But I would argue that my character may have gone through the most. From beginning to end.
Right.
And that's just so satisfying as an actor to play. And it's one of the things that TV provides that no other medium can provide. The idea of living with a character, not just for 2 hours or, you know, a month in a play, but over a span of years, and to watch how that character can grow and change and develop. And it's kind of like living with another
family
human.
member.
Yeah, it really is. So, and TV is structured like life. You know, you shoot your episodes. You don't know where you're going to end up, but you live your life day to day, like we do right now. You know, we wake up with a sense of who we are, and we hope the day goes well. And you know, over the course of time, we change.
Were you able to influence the development of your character?
I think the writers actually were really good about kind of seeing what we brought as actors and then writing to those strengths. So I think there was some influence there, but I also think the writers were really talented and just finding ways of deepening each of our characters. I think they did for all of us.
So how about the other show that you were on for quite some time, Hawaii Five-0?
Yeah, no, I mean,
what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, you know, a mixed experience, but you know, some of the positives were to highlight a show set in Hawaii, you know, and to have Asian faces on screen week after week. You know, we hired probably more Asian guest stars than any other TV show, and I think that's a real positive. And to kind of showcase Hawaii beyond just palm trees is always nice. Now, obviously, we don't have as much crime and nuclear weapons going off in Hawaii as Hawaii Five-0 kind of would have you believe, but there's a lot of positive from the portrayal of these characters and the setting.
I do have to say that the community in general, and by that I mean the Asian community in particular, but I think many communities are very grateful that you did bring up the issue, however, of pay equity. It was important, I think, for people to hear that there's imbalance still in our industry and that we are really at a critical turning point for a certain kind of awakening.
I think we remain at that turning point. You know, given what's going on in the country politically, it's certainly not a question that's been answered. You know, I remember once when President Obama was still in office, a reporter asked me whether we felt like we were in a post-racial society. And that was in 2014 or 2015.
Wow, the pendulum does swing, as we know.
I think back to that interview all the time when I consider what's happened in the years since then. And I would almost dare that reporter to ask that question again.
Yeah, okay. It's too tempting to go down that road, and then the rest of the afternoon would be.
Yeah, no, let's not
occupied.
depress everybody.
But there's so much good news actually on the horizon for Asians who are in front of the camera or behind the camera. I feel because of so many reasons. In my view, it's a lot to do with the streamers. It's a lot to do with social media. And it's a lot to do with the recognition that Asian markets are very significant. China, obviously, India, obviously, but Korea and others as well. How has this changed? And we were joking about it. There's sort of the pre-CRA and post-CRA eras that we're living in, meaning Crazy Rich Asians. How has your life changed?
Well, I mean, you look at the number of people in this room today. I think, you know, that's evidence that it's a much more relevant topic. And people are interested from outside the Asian American community. Whereas, you know, in the past, I feel like we've been kind of in an echo chamber where we're speaking to our own community. But now there's a lot more outreach. There's a lot more agency. I mean, Janet, you know, I've been around for a while, and you're one of the OGs. You know, you were fighting this fight before anyone else was listening. So, you know, the fact that we can sit up here on a stage today and talk about all the great new opportunities and how the world of entertainment is expanding and how we can straddle the screen, that's all, you know, new territory. That's a brave new world, and the fact that we can be here to kind of espouse it, to further it, that's a real privilege.
And to be able to say we want to hire Asian writers and directors and work with Asian producers, we have Asian journalists. You know, it has become a whole community that's been galvanized.
Absolutely.
And that's absolutely spectacular. What do you look for? You have already accomplished so much. What do you look forward to in the future?
I feel like there's so much more to do, honestly.
Okay.
You know, I feel like...
Breathlessly?
Yeah, no, I feel like the door is opening now. But now, what are we going to do when we get inside? You know, that's where the real work begins. It's one thing to get the opportunity. It's another thing to maximize those opportunities. And one thing that I'm always wary of is being considered someone who's looking for charity. You know, like, you know, the liberal snowflakes who are always crying about diversity. You know, to me, I'm sorry, I get a little angry about that. But
go for it.
I will say that, you know, we've been waiting for these opportunities for a long time. You know, people like us have been in the business for decades, not years. And so, you know, give us a shot and we'll show you what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to give an opportunity for some audience members to ask questions. I can see a lot of faces that look like they're full of anticipation.
Or maybe it's food coma.
Oh, maybe it's food coma. Hopefully we'll have a chance to eat. We know we've been rushing you through the day. We've just had so many wonderful speakers. Yes, here.
I'm actually interested in doing things with any market where I find an interesting project. I've developed shows from Italy, from Israel, from Japan. We're working on a show right now with an intellectual property from Japan. So the answer is yes. If I find the right thing, I'm interested. Does that call me? Is that what you're saying?
We're actually executive MBA students at UCLA, and we're creating a platform for exactly what you're requesting for multicultural and multi-ethnic content. But we want to make a platform where actually the directors are the stars to create that new content or the new cast, per se, that needs to be made or that you would envision. Would you consider being a partnership in terms of...
Wow, so many forward people in the audience. This is really a networking event, isn't it?
In terms of mentorship or advice.
You know, it's possible. You know, time is at a premium for me, but you know, it's something that we can explore. But I will say that it's really important that things like this happen at a collegiate level, at a scholarship level, because right now there's more demand for Asian American actors, directors, writers than ever. And so we need to place an emphasis on forming a grassroots farm system, if you will, where we can start developing talent as early as possible, because now there actually are opportunities. And so it's really important that those filling those opportunities are ready for them. Because the last thing we want is for us to be thought of as second rate, or that criticism that Asian actors, they're not funny and we just hire them for a diversity quotient. That's what we want to avoid. So it's really incumbent upon us to be really good at our craft.
I know for sure how funny you are. You make me laugh all the time. So with that, I'm sorry to say I think we've already exceeded our time.
That was fast.
Just flew by. This is so unfair. I would love to keep you here all afternoon, but we will have to thank Daniel for being here with us today.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.